thank you for everybody for joining us for our first webinar. Um, and as you know, that our topic from the from our slide is the topic is on preparing small farms for current market demands. This is a collaborative effort between Delaware State University Cooperative Extension and the University of Delaware Cooperative Extension, and it is funded through U.S. Department of Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service through the Climate Hub program, and Dr. Erin Lane is our coordinator for the program, and she will give you a few information about the program before we start the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm so glad to be here. Hi, I'm Erin Lane. So I'm with the USDA Northeast Climate Hub, and we're supporting this webinar, as Golnay said. Our collaboration is across USDA and with many land grant partners, including our key partners here at Delaware State University and the University of Delaware Extension. So today's topic of adapting to change and becoming resilient is very relevant to our focus, which is similar in adapting and becoming resilient, but for us, we focus on climate. Our aim is to deliver tools and practices, information, all sorts of resources that are both scientifically based and specific to our Northeast region. And the idea is that these resources assist farmers, land managers, any type of producer in achieving their goals in the changing climate. So I want to invite you to check out our website, and I'm going to put the link in the chat box. We have fact sheets and case studies, virtual tours, videos, webinars. If you want to sign up for our newsletter, you'll be able to get the information, the latest information quickly right to your inbox. And we also wanted to thank Delaware State, University of Delaware, and all of our other land grant partners because they contribute greatly to the resources that we provide. It's really a amazing partnership. So as we talk about dealing with change and building resiliency to climate, today's webinar, we're going to be learning about how to be part of that process of adapting under a different context. So thanks so much, and I look forward to today's talks.
So, hi everyone again. I am Dr. Golnay Osbey from Delaware State University Cooperative Extension, and I am a natural resources extension specialist. And I would like to briefly talk about our speakers. We have 4 outstanding speakers for today's talk. Dr. Gordon Johnson is assistant professor and extension specialist, primarily focusing on fruits and vegetables. He's part of the Department of Plant and Soil Sciences from University of Delaware. And his talk is written in here, and he can talk in details. And second speaker is Ms. Maria Pipidis, and she is also extension educator and county director for, she can probably give us in more details, and at the University of Delaware Cooperative Extension. And Miss Ineda Fuluharty is she's our outside of Delaware speaker. So we are really happy to have her from West Virginia. And it's very outstanding programs that they have with the West Virginia Agribility program. And it's just amazed me when I was online. So hopefully you will have a lot of good information. He's the Virginia Extension Service, Farms, Health, and Business, part of the Virginia Extension for Cooperative Extension. And our fourth speaker is Ms. Kathy Jackson, and she's EDA, and she's a marketing specialist, communication and marketing specialist, and she will have some updates for us. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Gordon Johnson. I'm the Extension Fruit and Vegetable Specialist with the University of Delaware. And we're going to talk about, as we've seen recently, our food system has had a lot of challenges, but one of the areas that has been particularly promising is the increased interest in buying locally. So let's talk about that. That's what we're going to talk about today. Next. So just letting you to remember what we're dealing with right now. COVID-19 has changed a lot of what we're trying to do as far as reaching our customers. Remember, it's a respiratory disease that's spread through droplets and enters in the mouth, nose, and eyes. So that's what we're trying to protect against. You know the main symptoms: fever, dry cough, and difficulty in breathing. But it's the person-to-person spread that's most important for you to protect against as you go through your marketing activities. Surfaces are important, but they're secondary. You really have to go through a series of events to pick up the virus from a surface. Still, surfaces that are contacted a lot should be focused on. Distancing is so very much important because the virus drops out of the air in larger droplets and about 3 feet. If you distance by 6 feet, that really helps to protect people. Face masks are there to protect others so that if you have the virus, you don't spread it or your customers don't. Hand washing is essential, and if you can have good hand washing facilities where you're marketing, that would be very important. Otherwise, alcohol-based sanitizers are our next best option. And as you design your facilities to market, think about ways to shielding your customers and yourself from this virus. Next. Next. Yep. So what is the value of local? So local food systems, thinking about in this times of COVID-19, I saw this from Food Logistics just recently. And I'm going to read it out and maybe we can talk about it a little more later. But for years, U.S. consumers have expressed a growing interest in developing a closer connection to their food products, whether through access to more localized markets or shorter supply chains. Even before COVID-19, consumers were frequently a variety of vendors beyond conventional grocery stores, including farmers markets, community-supported agriculture, and online orders. These changes suggest the local food economy is nimble and ready to respond to consumers' desire to feel more food secure, connected, and supportive of their farms and food producers. And we've been seeing this recently. There's for example, meat. There's such a huge demand for local meat that we've never seen that this kind of spike in the past. So, consumers are eager to support local produce growers. It's a good time to be trying to focus on what you can do to provide into the local food system. Next. Next. All right, so of course, a lot of you probably are or should consider selling directly from your farm. I have a 4-acre peach orchard, apple, I have a few other types of fruits, and I sell everything off of my farm at my farm. This has been a way where you can get that a full retail dollar. And because you're on your own farm, there aren't a whole lot of restrictions on how you can sell. So this has been a way for selling animal products, fruits and vegetables, and other floral items, for example. Next. So when you're connecting, when you're trying to sell directly and connect with your customers, you have to use a wide range of ways to do that. Certainly signs on your property can be a really good way to do this. Just a sign along the side of the road saying what you have, that you're open and you have eggs for sale, for example, or you have, in my case, peaches for sale. Most people are starting to develop their own farm web pages or having a social media page, such as a Facebook page. Still don't forget those local publications, the local advertising publications. We have one in Caroline County, Maryland, that everybody looks at, and it's fairly cheap to advertise in. And of course, once you start connecting with your customers, get their emails or their phone numbers and send them regular updates as they allow you to do. Next.
Hey, Gordon, just to interrupt real quick, I'm hitting next when you say it, but there is a little bit of a lag.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So one of the ways that our farms have been dealing with the COVID-19 situation has been by taking orders and then having their customers pick up those orders at the farm or at a location that they have designated. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to do this. There are a lot of good tools, free tools or add-on tools that you can get from software companies to do this. We see one from one of our local farms here where they're doing online ordering, then curbside pickup. Kind of like what people like what you do with Walmart. You order online and go and pick them up. You and your customers don't have to. You don't have that direct contact and a chance for having issues with the virus. Next. So again, when you're doing this, as you are fulfilling these orders that you get from whether you take phone orders or online orders, you want to think about how to do this safely. So this distancing as your customer pulls up, if you can get prepayments, that's better than trying to handle cash or handle a credit card at the time that they pick up. You can do that, but it would be better if you're doing something that if you're going to do it with a cash, that you have a drop box that they will put the cash in, and trust your customers. They're going to put in what they said they purchased. But again, cashless transactions would be preferred. Use of credit card readers would be a second best option. And you can see here how the farmers are putting the orders into the vehicles, or the customers have picked it up. They're in their masks, of course, and you have a place where they can pick it up and you don't have to directly interact with the customer at a close distance. Next. Of course, a lot of us, a lot of you may be interested or may already have a farm market, and this has been a way that a lot of our producers have reached their customers by selling their produce or their products that they grow or raise on their farms, as well as the products of other farmers around them. We have dozens of successful farmers markets in Delaware, and it doesn't have to be fancy. A lot of folks will start off with a couple of wagons along the road. That's their farm market, and then eventually build more permanent facilities. Next. One of the things, though, in this age of COVID-19 is you have to think about how to best do that safely, because you are going to have customers in the facility. So there's lots of different things to consider, and there's some guidelines out there that if you want more information on how to do this, we can send you or get you to some of those resources. Certainly have a single point of entry and single point of exit, having directional, having customers go in a single direction, having marked out what 6 foot distances are, making sure you have hand sanitizer stations, and if ideally a hand washing, but most facilities aren't going to have full hand washing. So again, having hand sanitizer stations and making sure you have good signage telling people to wear their masks, These are all things that are important to consider when you are selling at your farm market. Next. One of the things that's really neat now is that we're getting farm drive-throughs are coming back, or people are considering drive-throughs. You can see Evans Farm, they put a drive-through in theirs a number of years ago, but it's come in very handy with the issue with COVID-19 is people tell the employees inside what they want. They will place the order and then pick it, put it in their vehicle. We have on-farm ice cream that are doing similar things where they have a drive-through. So we have our ice cream, our dairy farms that have ice cream facilities. And this is, again, another interesting way to keep the sales, really, again, keeping your local sales going, but also being protective of your customers and your employees. Next. Kathy's going to talk more about farmers markets. I'm not going to really go into in detail, just suffice to say that farmers markets are back open in Delaware. They've been open in Maryland throughout the outbreak, but with certain restrictions or certain guidelines that need to be followed. So Kathy's going to talk to you more about that. Next. And again, this Kathy's going to talk to you more about these rules. Next. UPIC. UPIC presents some unique challenges. Certainly has been a way, particularly our berry growers have really benefited by having their customers on their farms, because not only do they get to have an experience of getting freshly picked produce that they have picked, it's outing out in the air. You're outside. It's and I think in this time of COVID-19, this whole idea of, hey, I can get outside for a while, I can be out in the fresh air, is even more desirable. Now, you know, there are guidelines for UPIC, so let's talk about a little bit about that next. So here are some of the guidelines Delaware has, and we'll go over it just briefly. They want customers to call ahead and have appointments to come and pick. They want people to have face masks and check in with the UPIC staff. They're going to give you containers. They don't want people to bring in their containers now. And then that distancing in the field, so that when you're picking, if it's a family group, they can be together, but you need to be between groups, and they need to be small groups. You need to maintain distancing. And then hand washing or hand sanitizing stations ahead of coming into the field. And then directional traffic, so that the people aren't going all through the field, but they're going down a row and then out the field. Again, thinking about electronic payments, and then when you return home, wipe down containers and then wash items you have picked. Next. All right, another area that we have really has been increasing throughout the last 2 decades has been the whole idea of the community supported agriculture, or CSAs. Next. So these are commonly prepaid shares where a member of the community supported agriculture group agrees to pay them at the beginning of the season for the grower or the farmer. And the farm provides a certain amount of what is in season or that is available, whether it's some produce, some eggs, or cheese. And they'll do this at usually weekly intervals to each member according to their shares. This is either picked up on the farm or it's delivered to another location that where the consumer meets the farmer. Next. All right, this is from one of our local farms, their options. So they have a $20 mini box that is farmer's choice. They have a small box, farmer's choice. That means the farmer gets to decide what goes in the box. Then they have custom box where you can order certain things that you would like, as well as what's in season for the farm. They have a larger box and even a custom box for larger. So you don't have to get this complicated. Okay, Russ says maybe pick in your own. The farmer pick your own can grow till. Well, okay, we'll talk about the comment in a minute. All right, so how to organize your CSAs for safety? Well, one of the things is a lot of our CSAs depend a lot on volunteers to help them pick and pack, and so everything that you need to do as far as distancing, using masks, washing hands frequently, this should be really emphasized. And you should probably have the fulfill stations where you're packing in those boxes or bags. You have certain dedicated people so that you are not running into each other at close quarters. You should probably think about having, rather than reusable containers, this time you might want to invest in some containers or bags that then are all single use, so that you don't have the possibility of having contaminated containers or bags coming back. And then as far as pickup or delivery, same thing, practicing good social distancing, mask use. Gloves are not necessarily necessary as long as you have good hand washing available. If you don't have good hand washing, then having hand sanitizer available for you and your customers. Next. And what's really gained a lot of traction, and it's something for you to consider, is this idea of home deliveries. This is a way for a lot of you who may have in the past sold directly to restaurants or sold to other local wholesale outlets where those are no longer open or only limited sales. This is a way that you can get your produce or your other farm products directly to the consumer or to the customer. And lots of different ways to do this. Does require having vehicles and staff to do this, to do the deliveries. And again, as you do the deliveries, making sure that you're doing good distancing, like putting the box on the porch and then ringing the bell, that kind of thing. So deciding ahead of time how your customer wants the product to be delivered to their home. Next. One of the things we don't think about much, but it is possible with certain products, is direct shipment. That is where you take orders online and ship it directly to them. This is about as safe a way in the time of COVID-19 as you can do things. Certainly, the pecan industry is a great example. They saw a huge amount of their product directly shipped online. And we've had other people in Delaware do this in the past, other producers. I bought a few things from Omaha Steaks. They're very pricey, but I got a few things in during a couple of weeks ago, and they were shipping meat products frozen in a container with dry ice and get shipped directly to your home. So when there's a will, there's a way. There's certain types of produce that lend themselves well to this. The Vidalia onion folks do a lot of direct shipment of onions from their farms directly to people. So think about this. It's not for everybody, but when you take orders from line and you can ship directly to those people without using our shipping companies, then certainly this is another way that you could market your products. Next. Certainly, you want to keep your family employees safe. Again, there's potential as we have some shortage of our migrant labor. Look to hire locally. There's a lot of people out of work and that would be willing to do jobs. I know picking produce isn't something that a lot of people want to do, but there's certainly other jobs within your farm that could be done with local folks. Just you need to work safely, have them work safely. These are all the different things that you want to make sure that happens for your employees. And we've talked about these already. Next. Finally, we're getting down to the end. There's still a potential because our local food retailers have been open. To keep on your wholesale sales to our local markets, our local farm stands, country stores, and even our small chain supermarkets. Because some of our supply chains have been disrupted, I think they would be very willing to handle local produce in their operations. Next. One of the things that is going to be a challenge is what we have been doing for on-farm activities and agritourism. A lot of those have been curtailed, and as the restrictions come back off, you need to think very carefully about how to do these in a safe manner. We have good guidelines for UPIC operations now, but as we go into other agritourism type operations, you may have to rethink what you can and can't do for the year. I know this is a big chunk of change for a lot of farms, but it's going to be a little more difficult to do this year. Say you're a pumpkin patch and you have folks coming in, that's going to be a little harder to do. Next. All right, so I'll open it up for any questions. So if you have a question, just unmute yourself and I'd be happy to answer it. Or type it in the chat and I can, we'll get it off of chat.
Jason, do you see some?
I'm watching it.
Okay, would you like to read it?
No,
Go ahead, Gordon.
yeah, I don't think there's any in chat right this very minute. One of the things that I will leave you with is that those of you who are going to take online orders, there are a lot of good software companies that, and I'll get Karen in here in a second, that you can use to, and some specifically designed to take orders from farms. From farmers. So if you need those kind of resources, I will send a publication to Megan and then you can distribute it to anybody that would like. So that's online, how to take online orders. Do you have any suggestions for resources to find your local market? Yes. Local markets, Delaware Department of Agriculture has a site in Delaware. So does the Maryland Department of Agriculture. Future Harvest is another group of sustainable agriculture producers that have a site where you can find who is growing locally.
Gordon, if I could jump in here for a minute, the Delaware site is delawaregrown.com, so that's pretty easy to remember. We also have a site, buy local site as part of the Delaware Ag website that also lists all the farmers markets and farm stands.
Okay, thank you much. There can be difficulty in pricing for producers. Yes, pricing is another half-hour topic. So you start with what you certainly need to know what your costs are. You need to know what the general pricing has been for that. Okay, great. Hey, Rick, great resource. All right. Well, I think I'm bleeding into other people's time, so I am going to mute and let our next speaker.
So hello, everyone. My name is Maria Papitas. I work with the University of Delaware Cooperative Extension, and I am a family and consumer science educator, kind of with a specialty in financial management and health insurance literacy. So today I've been so pleased to be invited to participate and to speak a little bit about linking farm vitality and health, especially in this time when people are, overly stressed, potentially worried about health and the complications of COVID, and how that can really impact your farm vitality. And so today's talk is just a little bit about, to get you thinking about what are some of those connections and what are some resources out there. And so I would like to start actually with a little video. So I'm going to play this video. Oops. We don't want to do that. Here we go. So I love that little tune in that video. So I'm hoping that that video kind of got you to think a little bit about some of the really key things that you need to think about as you're creating your risk management plans for your farms as it relates to kind of the human risk. And that human risk is, you and your farming employees, as well as your family members, because they all kind of link together to keep your farm going. And so health and well-being is really important to think about. And so on this slide, we kind of talk a little bit about a self-assessment. And post this program, Megan and her colleagues will be sending you a follow-up email, and in that email will be a self-assessment tool that you can use. But some of the things that self-assessment tool kind of looks at and covers are things like having health insurance, and not only having health insurance, but actually using it and accessing care when you need it. So to be thinking about, when I'm sick, do I go, right? And how do I pay for that? Certainly having that risk management plan in place for all areas of risk, but especially thinking about that human area. Thinking about communicating about business operations with family employees. One of the things I really know about farmers is we tend to keep it in our heads, and we may be thinking about things, but we may not necessarily be sharing them. And so if something happens to you, whether you get sick with COVID or whether you, break a wrist or are feeling overly stressed and are not, thinking and doing as well as you could be, you need to have those contingency plans in place, if something really happens. And who are those helpers going to be? And do they know, have you communicated with them enough about being enough so that they could take over and have implement those contingency plans? One of the things that we know too is in very stressful times, having people to talk to is important. And they could be family and friends, but it could also be your friendly extension educator, right? People who can really help you get grounded, help you, help you express some of your stress or frustration, maybe help you provide some ideas, be resources for you. So having those key support people in place is really important. The next bullet really has to do with all of those important documents, right? Do you have an estate plan? Do you have a healthcare directive? Do you have a power of attorney? And those kinds of documents in place so that if something happens, then the farm business has someone who can step in temporarily while you are healing, for example, or that someone can step in and help make healthcare decisions for you if you are not able to do that. And certainly that estate plan is sort of the piece that happens or gets to put in place if and when you pass away, not if, but when you pass away. But the succession plan and the retirement plans are things that you need to work on kind of now as you're approaching retirement or, are kind of near the end of your life, right? So what are those things that you want to have happen with the farm, with the equipment, with the business, and how do I begin to prepare the next generation or a set of workers to help us transition the farm? But then also, how do I put in place a retirement plan so that I can retire and have people ready to help take over? So all of those are important documents and conversations to have with family and a lawyer, right, to get those plans in place. And lastly, here is this idea of, savings, right? Savings that can help cover, say, a deductible on a health insurance plan or a copayment. And this idea of multiple sources of income that can help stabilize and create a financial security that really helps you kind of pay the bills and keep debt under control. All of those pieces, right, you need to be thinking about and kind of, in the self-assessment tool, what it helps you do is sort of think about, where am I? Are there some things that I need to be doing to get myself in a place where I don't have to think about these things or I don't have to worry about these things? So I wanted to kind of turn now and talk a little bit about health insurance. And we know from statistics that about 92% of farmers know that health insurance is an important part of their risk management plan. And yet some folks don't have it, or they have two or more plans that are helping them to cover themselves and their family members. So for example, there may be an off-farm job that offers health insurance that then covers the person who's working off farm, but also the farming family members. There may be kind of health insurance assistance programs like the CHIP, which is the Children's Health Insurance Program, that helps cover children who are under 18 with health insurance coverage, and that is offered to limited income families or limited income families. Medicare obviously is a health insurance option for people who are over 65 or who are disabled. And then another source of health insurance is the Health Insurance Marketplace, which is the program that provides tax credits or subsidies to offset the cost of premiums. And all of that depends on what your income is. So because the cost of insurance and deductibles are high, and oftentimes they keep people from actually using health insurance even if they have it. And so in the last slide, when I talked a little bit about savings, it's important then to sort of understand your health insurance plans and thinking about, how do I typically use health insurance and what kind of savings do I need to have in place so that I can access care when I need it. There has been a trend over the last 10 years of moving the cost of care, more of the cost of care to consumers, right? And yet we need to have access to care. And so that whole idea of saving so that we can access care when we need it is going to continue. So what are some health insurance options for farmers? So certainly I mentioned that off-farm employment, so one of the spouses maybe has off-farm employment that covers, and this happens in a lot of cases. If that person has lost their job, they would be eligible for COBRA, which is basically the acronym for a federal law that ensures that if you lose your insurance from a employer, you can continue to have that same health insurance coverage for up to 18 months. And that is, you would have to pay the full cost, but at least it keeps you covered by health insurance until you can make other plans. The third bullet here is the state-based health insurance marketplace. In Delaware, that website is choosehealthde.org. You could also go to healthcare.gov. It has to be healthcare.gov, G-O-V. There are some scam ones out there, so you definitely want healthcare.gov. But either place will help you figure out what your health, connect you into either kind of government subsidized programs like Medicaid or CHIP, or kind of those government health insurance subsidies that I mentioned before. So on the healthcare.gov and ChooseHealthDE, those are special plans that are selected through our insurance department here in the state of Delaware that has negotiated rates, and that depending on your income, right, you can receive subsidies or tax credits to help offset the cost of the premium. So it's an excellent resource and an excellent benefit, and your income can actually be pretty high. It's based on your income and also your number of family members. And if your income is 400% of the poverty level or less, you would be eligible for some of those subsidies or tax credits. So it's an important resource out there for people who feel like they can't get access to health insurance. Other places you can go are agents and brokers, or even the health insurance company directly, right, to purchase health insurance policies. But if you go through those other avenues, you may not be eligible to get those tax credits or subsidies. So it's really important to be sure when you're talking with an agent or broker that there are some that are certified to sell those health insurance marketplace subsidized insurance policies, And so it would be important then to be sure that they are certified to do that and make that option available to you. So before I mentioned the Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program, those are again for low income citizens. And I have to say there are some farmers and farm families that are not bringing in a lot of income and would therefore qualify for those kinds of helps. And then of course Medicare is for those who are 65 or older or disabled. So how do you choose? You know, comparison shopping for health insurance plans is really important. You want to really think about what your healthcare needs are for you and your family. What type of doctors do you need to see? You know, what kind of care, and sort of who needs what kind of care. You want to think about what your income is, and as I mentioned, depending on your income, you may be eligible for Medicaid or CHIP or those tax credits on the health insurance marketplace. And another important consideration is who's going to pay that health insurance premium bill? Is it coming from the family budget, or is it coming out of is it going to be considered a farm expense? Both of those have implications, right, for the kinds of health insurance that you might be eligible for and how much that insurance policy might be. So the other thing you need to think about is how will you comparison shop your options, right? So thinking a little bit about, you know, am I going to just talk with a broker? Am I going to talk with what is called a healthcare navigator who can help me with the choices that might be on the health insurance marketplace? So there are a number of ways, you know, or you're going to do it yourself, right? So all of those things are strategies, but the bottom line is you're going to need to comparison shop based on your needs and your income. So I wanted to share a couple of resources with you. We have at the University of Delaware Extension a free online educational program, and it's located here at this udel.edu extension Insure. That's pretty easy to find. And it's a series of videos and actually some worksheets. So this whole idea of how do I comparison shop, or, you know, what are my insurance options, those kinds of resources are there on that website. The other great spot is University of Maryland has another website called Insuring Your Health. Again, lots of resources there to kind of help you better understand health insurance and what your options are. And then the last is that healthcare.gov. It's a national website. I have to say, for a federal government website, it's pretty easy to use. It's very user-friendly, and they're recognizing that a lot of people are confused about health insurance. I also wanted to put a quick plug in to an upcoming educational series on health insurance that University of Maryland and University of Delaware Extension will be doing together. And so you can see the titles, and the first one coming up in June on the 30th is about understanding health insurance options for farmers. And then we'll talk about making a good choice and, you know, ways to use your insurance effectively, that kind of thing. And we have a registration link already ready to go. One of the other things that I'm hoping that my colleagues here will send to you is a flyer about these upcoming workshops. So that will be coming hopefully in the mail, in the email to you that follows this program. And so that leaves me to questions. I'm happy to answer any questions, and would love to see them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself to ask those questions. Great, thank you. I know that was a lot of information really fast.
Do we have any questions from the chat box?
I know there's no questions in the chat box, so.
All right. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Inetta Fluharty, and I'm with West Virginia State University Extension Service. And today I'm going to be talking to you about emergency preparedness for you and your farm. And with what we've been going through here lately with the COVID-19, it seems like, you know, emergencies hit us really quickly. So this is going to try and help prepare you and your family as well as your farm. Okay. Next. This just tells a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm with West Virginia State University Extension Service. I'm the West Virginia Agribility Coordinator. And for those of you that don't know what agribility is, we work with farmers that have disabilities, limitations. A lot of our farmers are aging, elderly, and they, you know, have arthritis or a bad back and need to figure out alternative ways to be able to continue to farm, whether that is modifying their farm equipment or whether that is actually looking at the farm and figuring out, is there someone else that can do some of the tasks or revamping what they're doing. And I've been with West Virginia Agribility for 20 years now, and it's a wonderful program. Also, I'm an assistive technology professional. So there again, I work with a lot of the assistive technology and help farmers figure out what's out there, as well as an agricultural safety and health professional. Okay, next. So like I said earlier, today we're going to try and understand what is the importance of being prepared in an emergency for you, for your family, for the employees on your farm, and for your farm. Okay, next. Whenever there's an emergency, usually there's some migration that goes on. And folks that live next to the shore during hurricane season are very much aware of this. You know, they move west to get away from the ocean, or in the Gulf, they move north or west, wherever, just to get away from that. I have some statistics here that deals just with West Virginia, because we looked at if there is an emergency in the Washington, Baltimore area, the evacuation route comes right through the middle of West Virginia. And so there's a lot of things that we need to consider. One of the first is that if that does happen, we're looking at about 1.3 million people passing through West Virginia. And about 700,000 of those people will stay at least one night in West Virginia. So whenever we're thinking of that, that's a huge number that's going to come in and hit our infrastructure. And so if we think of 20% of the entire population has a disability, if you apply that to these numbers, there's like 260,000 people that will pass through West Virginia, with 140,000 staying at least overnight. Having enough lodging for folks with disabilities is a huge problem. So there again, that infrastructure. Looking at people that own a pet, if 60% of the population that's coming through owns a pet, you're looking at 780,000 pets that are going to pass through. And then what happens with the people that may have addictions? You know, if they have to be evacuated and they're coming through and they don't have their support systems, do you have access to security on your farm? So, you know, what's going to happen with those folks? And then when we look at our youth, birth to 2 years old, you know, is there going to be enough diapers, formulas, all of those things? And then what about persons that don't speak English? And so whenever we were looking at an emergency preparedness plan, we had to take all of these things into consideration to make sure that we had things in place. And let me tell you, with the COVID-19 things that came on, we found that we wasn't ready. And because what was happening was, and this happened here on our farm, that folks from New York, Washington, Baltimore purchased campers, and they wanted to get away from the COVID hotspot. And we had campers parked along National Forest roads. At one point, there was like 66 campers along a road, and you don't know how many people was in those campers. All of those folks were coming to our stores, coming, buying everything. So this migration during the COVID pandemic really affected us. Here on our farm, we have a landing that we have some of our equipment parked. And one day I went out and there was 2 campers there parked beside our balers. And it's like, what are you doing here? And they're like, well, we needed some place to stay. So during an emergency, there's lots of different things that can happen. So that's why I wanted to put some of those statistics up there so that you could start thinking about those. And like I said, those are West Virginia statistics, but you might want to think about how your own community and if you're a farm, a rural community, how would you be affected if something happened and all these folks came through your area? Okay, next. So the first thing we're going to talk about is your own personal preparedness. Some questions we need to ask is, what's your biggest concern in an emergency? What special accommodations do you think that you would need in that emergency? And how would you include how do you choose your support network, and who would you include? Okay, next. We're going to talk about all of those. So why would you want to prepare? Statistics show that if you have a plan in place, that things don't go as wrong as what they do if you have no plan. So having that plan in place helps you just know what's going to happen. Also, systems that you rely on may not be available. I know whenever Superstorm Sandy went through here, cell phone towers, we didn't have electric for going on 3 weeks. So even the backup batteries for cell phone towers went down. So if all you had was a cell phone and didn't have a landline, you had no communication. So we try and explain that to people because they're like, oh, it's okay, no problem. So we want to make sure that folks understand that. A lot of financial institutions, if the electric's down, you can't get money. You can't use your ATM card. You can't do all of those things. You can't get your prescriptions. So those are things that you need to kind of think about as we're going through this and preparing. Okay, next. So here, I was wanting you to, these are just some different emergencies. And what we usually do is we plan for the emergencies that we think are going to happen most often. For instance, we probably all have a spare tire in our car because chances are if we travel a lot, we may have a flat tire. But do we carry a battery? Do we carry an alternator? Probably not, because those are things that probably aren't going to happen. So we try and plan for the things that happen. For instance, in Florida, folks that are leaving for hurricanes, they get a lot of advance notice so they can leave. But recently there was a chemical spill in South Carolina, I believe. Where was it? Yeah, in Granville, South Carolina, that everyone had to evacuate, and they wasn't prepared. They had nothing ready. And so it's one of those things where if we have a plan, we have everything ready, if something happens at the spur of the moment and we're told we have to leave now, we're able to do that. Next. Some general issues. Basically, this is, like I said before, make sure you have a landline phone, know where your gas and water shutoff is, how to use fire extinguishers. Those are some of the basics. Also, does anyone in your family need assistance? Is there elderly, young children, a person with a disability? And it may not be just in your family. Maybe it's one of your farm employees has some types of limitations. So these are some issues that you need to think about as we start looking at how to make that plan. Next. This is some of the types of assistance that I have people to think about. This is a whole nother training that I do for people with disabilities. But we need to think about that because there again, if you have an elderly person in your family, and let's say they have some physical mobility issues and they use a wheelchair. If you're evacuated, let's say that's a powered wheelchair, and you're evacuated and you can't take the powered wheelchair with you. What kind of mobility are they going to use? Do you have something in place that they can use because you can't get the powered wheelchair out? Or a person with a mental illness that overstimulation is just something, and they're placed in a shelter that's noisy and loud, and that may affect their mental illness. You know, someone that has vision impairments, and you know, like the video that we watched earlier had all this music and was writing. If someone had a visual impairment, would not be able to participate in that. So if they're in a shelter and you're showing information but not reading it, that's a problem. So there again, whenever you're thinking of your personal plan, think of some of these things, and is there a way that you need to work that into your plan? Okay, next. You need to establish a support team. And basically this is somebody that's going to help you evacuate, if you're sheltering in place, whatever. But you need to make sure that there are people that are around you. You know, I have a lot of people say, oh yeah, my brother, you know, he's part of my support team. But here, their brother lives 2 states away. Well, if in the case of an emergency evacuation, that brother's not going to be a lot of support for them. And also, it's showing that over 70% of all rescues are from your neighbors. It's not from the professional first responders that come in. So there again, having that in place and people knowing what needs to happen will make sure that in a disaster, things will go a lot better. And don't try to rely on one person, because that one person may be having to evacuate also, and they can't come to help you evacuate, or you may not be able to get in touch with them. And then you also need to make sure that you're able to give people quick information on how's the best way to help you if someone comes. Okay, next. So now we're here that we're actually creating the emergency plan for you and your family. So you need a list of all your out-of-state friends and relatives, because there again, if you get separated into different shelters, having a place of contact for people that they can get so that everyone knows that you're okay. Keep copies of important papers stored together, like your passport, your driver's license, medical histories, your deed to your home, your social security cards, health, car, homeowners, farm insurance. What I tell everyone to do is I keep 3 copies of all of this. And I keep a copy at home in a little Ziploc bag that if I have to, I can grab it and go. I have all this information scanned on a flash drive that I have stored in my safety deposit box at the bank. And then I also have a 3rd copy that I have with a relative that lives out of state. So if something happens and I can't have access to one or the other of those, I can still get that information. So, and like I said, having it, you know, in just one place, a lot of times you don't have time to grab whatever it is. You need it someplace else. You need to fix yourself an emergency go kit. And basically this is just, if you have to, it's something you have sitting by the door, someplace easy to get a hold of. You can grab it and go. You need to have a first aid kit in there. Medications, now not prescription medications, but like ibuprofen or Tums or things like that that you can keep in there. Some emergency food and water. small containers, because there again, you're going to have to be carrying this. A flashlight with extra batteries, any solar chargers, gloves and face masks. There again, we found with 9/11, all of the debris and the dust that people were breathing in. You don't know what kind of emergency you'll be in. Make sure you have those face masks. Gloves, there again, you may have to be moving debris out of your way. So to make sure that you protect your hands, and keep cash in this Go Kit, because there again, you may not have access to your bank, and if you have to do everything in cash, you need to have some of that on hand. Okay, next. Some of the other items in your grab and go. So the other was like your kit. These are things that you might, if you have time, you might want to go around and be able to make sure you have your credit cards and cash, your prescriptions, hygiene products, any infant things, formula, diapers, wipes. If you can, you can take a small thing of bleach with an eyedropper in case you need safe drinking water. You can treat that a little bit. We suggest not to do that routinely, but in an emergency, you might have to do that. Take a change of clothes, comfortable shoes, blankets, keys to your home, your car. If you have an off-site storage facility, make sure you have the keys to that. Any of your pets, any of the essential things you need with them. And then a small assortment of sentimental things, like your wedding ring, maybe a family photo. But if you can't get those, don't worry about them. You need to make sure that you're able to evacuate. Next. So we went through your personal preparedness. Now we need to look at getting your farm ready. So do you have an emergency plan for your farm? Does everyone on the farm, including all of your employees, know what that emergency plan is and how to implement? And do you have an inventory of your livestock, all of their records, and all of the equipment and things that you have that's easily accessible? So there again, not only are you trying to get yourself ready, but now you've got to think about everything on your farm and get it ready. Next. So here we are making our farm plan. So you need to determine what disasters or hazards are most likely on your farm. In our area, we have a lot of snow and ice. So we get some flooding, but we don't really have tornadoes or hurricanes. So, we would be planning for that. If someone lives in a floodplain, they may need to plan for the flooding. So you need to plan for the hazards that you think are going to happen most of the time. There again, with this COVID-19 pandemic, no one saw that coming. So that was one of those things that if you have a plan in place, you can minimize the what's going on with that. Then also you need to plan for the type of your farm as well as the type of disaster. So if you have agritourism, not only are you going to have to figure out how to do a plan for your employees and your equipment and all of that, what if there's a terrorist attack and you have a farm full of fifth graders that are out picking pumpkins? You've got to have some sort of an emergency plan in place that will take care of that. Then also you need to have the plan so that the effects of the disaster on livestock are minimized. So whenever you're mitigating the disaster's effect, if it can't be avoided, you can do some changes to help mitigate the effects of that. And do you need to shelter your animals in place, or do you need to evacuate them? Sometimes you need to do more than one approach. If we're looking at mitigation, we need to look at the long-term risk to life and property. If you're in a hurricane area, there's hurricane seeding. You need to make sure that you use plants that are native to the area, because if you don't have plants that are native to the area, they may not be able to handle what's going to be happening. You may have to tie down houses, barns with ground anchors. You may want to redirect if there's flooding that comes in a lot by digging channels. You may be able to redirect some of that impact. You may want to do different repairs. You know, if you have things that's loose on your barn roof, make sure that you repair that so that in a windstorm that you don't have loose things blowing off the barn and making a issue there. Cleaning up and moving trash piles. There again, if it floods, you have trash that's flowing into the streams, and who knows where else it's going to end up. And the same with your chemicals. Make sure that, especially in flooding, that you can move those to an area that it's not going to leak into your pastures or into any waterways. Next. So in order to manage the disaster response, we need to work with our local emergency management people. One of the problems that we found with our state in developing an emergency preparedness for animals was if an alert comes out for people to evacuate. The same we get the same evacuation notice at the same time to evacuate our animals. Well, the problem with that is that it takes so much longer. You know, you've got to have all these people to be able to move animals. And then, or if you decide to leave the animals and you evacuate, once the disaster's over, then the government may say, no, it's not safe to go back in there. You can't go back in yet. But yet you have all these animals that need to be fed. So one of the things that we try and do is to make sure that we have somebody on that emergency management team. And veterinarians seem to be very good at this. And basically they can get the officials to understand, okay, I understand you're not opening that people can't come back in, but farmers need to get back in to be able to take care of the animals. So that's one of the things that you need to look at whenever you're looking at your emergency management team. Next. Okay, so now we're looking at evacuation. You need to have a plan and go over this plan with everyone. You know, the procedure, the place, the route. Keep in mind, if you are evacuating animals, you cannot evacuate animals on the same route that humans evacuate. So therefore, you have to have another route. So you've got to think this through and have a plan. Plus, you need to know, where are you taking those animals? And is it set up? Is it a local fairground that is designated as the place to shelter animals? Do you have a neighbor someplace along the way that says, hey, I have an extra barn, you can bring animals? So you need to think about that. Also, you need to think about what animals do you want to evacuate, because you may not be able to evacuate all of them. You may need to look at the ones that have the highest breeding rates, maybe the most expensive animals, but you need to make sure that you know what that is beforehand. Make sure that you take all of their water, their identification records, any restraints that you may need. All of that needs to be evacuated with the animal. Okay, next. If you're sheltering in place, this is an issue that, especially with farm cats and dogs, most of the time, cats and dogs will stay around their local place. Some farm dogs are very aggressive, and so therefore, they can't, you can't just turn them loose. So if it's flooding, the humane thing to do is to turn the animals loose and let them, find higher ground, and then they'll usually come back to the house. But if it's aggressive animals, first of all, if you can't put them inside, then it's not humane to leave them tied up, because they surely will drown. And if you turn them loose, they may be aggressive and may attack other people. So in that situation, the humane thing to do is, once the last thing and you're getting out, is to put the dog down, is to euthanize that dog to make sure that it doesn't injure someone else. And that's something that's really hard for a lot of farmers is how can you do this? But at the same time, if you have folks coming in, you don't want that dog to injure someone else. And also looking at making sure that if you just turn your animals loose, go back and try and gather them up so that they don't become feral and become a health nuisance. Next. This is just a real quick chart. I'm not going to go over it. That basically shows if you are sheltering in place or even evacuating, what the dietary requirements are for different types of animals. So if we look at a horse, you need 5 to 12 gallons of water per 1,000 pounds. So somehow that's a lot of water for a horse per day. And you need 20 pounds of hay per 1,000 pounds a day. So these are things to think about as you're making that your emergency plan. Do you have access to that if you're sheltering in place and everything, or if you're even evacuating, how are you going to take that much with you? Next. So a farm disaster kit is going to be kind of the same thing as your personal disaster kit, but you're going to need a list of all of your animals, all of the locations where they are, their vaccination records, any tests, where they're located on the farm, and you need to have proof of ownership. The problem is that we ran into this with Superstorm Sandy, is the snow is so deep that the fences were down, the cows started wandering around, and if you didn't know what your cow was, whether it be tagged or branded or whatever, all of a sudden these cows started wandering together. When it comes time to separate it, it can cause a lot of problems. So make sure you have proof of ownership. I've known people that have actually taken spray paint at the very last minute and spray painted their initials on the side of their livestock, because then that way it proves that these are their animals before they actually left. You want to have the basic first aid kit. You want to have all of your handling equipment for any animals, water, feed, flashlight batteries, anything that you would need for your trailer, your vehicle, emergency phone numbers, your vets, your insurance, any suppliers. So if something's going on and you're evacuating, you need to be able to let your supplier know that if they're supposed to be bringing fuel, don't be bringing fuel tomorrow. We're leaving, you can't get in. So you need to make sure you have all that contact information. And there again, make sure you have that farm inventory, your livestock, the equipment that you have, everything that you can think of. You need to, where is your pesticides stored? What kind of crops do you have? So you need to have all of that listed, and there again, kept in that safe spot, whether it's in your safe deposit box, if it's someplace else, so that you have access to that. Because if something happens and you need to go to your insurance company, they're going to ask you, how many acres of hay did you have or whatever? And if you have that already written down, it's not an issue. Okay, next. One of the other things that we recommend is make sure you have a farm site map. This is not only for, large disasters that you may have to evacuate or whatever, but if there's a fire on your property, just so that whenever the first responders show up, they know where are the buildings and the structures, where is there an access route, where's the gates, where do you store your chemicals, your hazardous substance, where's the shutoffs, where's all the livestock located. So this is actually off of, it's called Farm Mapper. And so you can go online and get this. You can pull it up and put your own stuff in. And it's a nice thing to have so that your first responders know where everything is, as well as if, again, if you're evacuating, so that you can, you know, show that to whoever, and they would know where, like, your cattle are, your horses. Next. Stockpile supplies that you need to protect your farm. There again, if you're in a flooding area, maybe keep sandbags and a pile of sand on hand. So if you have to, you know, fill sandbags, you can. Lumber if you need to put over windows for hurricanes. Make sure you have hand tools that don't operate on electric so that you can, you know, if the electric's out. A gas powered generator. That's one of those things that I recommend if you can afford it at all, make sure you have a gas powered generator and enough fuel to last for a while, because there again, whenever we ran into Superstorm Sandy, we didn't have to evacuate. We sheltered in place, but for 3 weeks we had no electric. So we lost everything in our freezer. Well, we didn't, we had the generator, but our neighbors, they lost everything in their freezers. They, you know, they couldn't run like anything at their barn or anything. So this was just something that I recommend. If you can, make sure you have a generator. Next. So basically the time to prepare is now. I always say, you know, whenever the water's rising and coming in your front door, it's not the time to try and figure out what the plan is. The plan is get it done now. Make sure that everyone in your family knows what the plan is. Any of your farm employees, make sure they know what the plan is. If you have to practice, think about those issues. If you have somebody that's elderly or has a disability, what types of special needs that they might need. And like I said, I have a whole other training that I do just on getting ready for a disaster if you have a disability. But whenever you're looking at everything, it's a lot to take in, to make sure yourself, your family, your workers, if you have agritourism, make sure that plan is in place. And all of your animals, your equipment, your crops, have a plan so that it makes it a little easier after the disaster is over. Next. These next couple of slides, I'm not even going to go over, but Penn State has an emergency preparedness site that you can go to, and actually has forms that you can fill out to help you do this plan. You can go to the next one. And this next one just shows like another page there from Penn State. I think this was on crops. It just has questions you can ask and go through. Next. And then this is out of Iowa. It's Prep for Ag Threats. Basically, this is just an emergency contact form that we talked about earlier. And there's lots of those out there so that you don't have to actually make it up yourself. Next. Any questions?
Hey, Andy, I'm not sure I understand your question. If you can unmute yourself and ask it if you'd like.
Andy, are you on call? Oh, he said she already answered during her slide presentation.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Ineta. Thank you. And
my next slide actually has my contact information. If anyone needs additional information, my phone and my email there at West Virginia State, you can get in touch with me at any time.
Great. All right.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kathy Jackson. I'm from the Delaware Department of Agriculture. And I'm going to talk about protocols for the farmers markets under COVID-19. As with everything else that has anything to do with COVID-19, everything's a moving target. So these, the protocols that I'm going to talk about today are in effect right now. On June 15th, we'll move to phase 2 of reopening, and we will have some new protocols at that point, some loosening of these protocols, but I don't have those I don't know those yet. So I'm going to go ahead and present what is going on right now. So move to the next slide. And the next one. Okay, these protocols were developed by a coalition of the Delaware Farmers Market managers and the Department of Agriculture, and they allowed the Delaware Farmers Markets to open safely starting May 15th. The intention is to allow farmers to sell their produce, specialty crops, value-added items in a safe way. It gives the consumers a way to access fresh food directly from family farms. And as Gordon was saying, there is a real demand for the fresh local food right now. So next slide, please. Okay. Once again, I think we're all familiar now with the different symptoms of COVID-19. It's really important that if anyone has any of those symptoms, that they do not attend a farmer's market or really any other event, whether you're a vendor, a volunteer at the market, or a customer. Next slide. So this year only, I mean, these are all activities that we have encouraged at farmers markets in the past. They've made farmers markets community events that are fun, and they're, make it more than just a place to buy local produce. But this year, there are no social gatherings at farmers markets, no entertainment, no music or anything like that. No community agency displays, no on-site food preparation, no food samples or cooking demos. And we're asking that there be no tablecloths on vendors' tables so that they're easier to clean and sanitize, and no pets. If someone has a service animal, that is allowed, but there are certain markets especially that had lots of pets. We're asking, that everyone take basic sanitary measures, that everyone wear a mask, that routinely vendors clean and disinfect the tables and other contact points. Vendors must use hand sanitizer or wash their hands frequently, and the market must make hand sanitizer or hand washing stations available to all customers and staff. Move to the next slide. The market setup this year is quite a bit different than in the past. Vendor booths have to be 12 feet apart. Foot traffic has to be one way with one entrance and one exit, no doubling back to move to one vendor and then see something and go back to another one. The perimeter of the market has to be marked with caution cones, barriers, or caution tape. There needs to be clear signage with the rules for customers posted at the entrance of the market. Markets need to use signage or space markers to remind customers to stay at least 6 feet apart. I know a lot of the markets have been using either like masking tape or on the ground, or chalk or spray paint to do that. There's a gatekeeper that must allow only double the number of customers as vendors. So if you have 6 vendors in your market, there can only be 12 people at a time in the market. Next. Vendors have to remain at their own booths. They have to provide a barrier in front of the booth to maintain at least a 6-foot distance between the customer and the vendor. That's, usually just a table put at the front of the booth. And then all items are kept out of customer reach, and the vendor has to hand the items to the customers for purchase. We are encouraging vendors to pre-package their fruits and vegetables as much as possible in order to keep the lines moving. Everyone needs to display clear, legible price information for everything that's for sale. And we are encouraging vendors to price items in even amounts to limit cash handling. Next slide. The customers need to know to wait their turn, 2 customers per vendor at a time, so only 2 customers at a table. We're asking customers to shop independently, no more than 2 people per household to enter the market. Obviously, there's cases where you may have a parent that has to bring 2 children to the market because there's no one else available to watch the children. You know, you have to use a little bit of discretion at that point, but that's the, you know, ideally no more than 2 people per household. Everyone needs to stay 6 feet away from themselves and others. Electronic payment is preferred. However, there are markets where it's very difficult to get any kind of cell signal, so that doesn't work very well. There's also some farmers that just do not accept electronic payment. So if it's possible to do electronic, that's good, but there are cases where that doesn't happen. We're asking customers to wash their produce and wipe down packaging when they get home. Ask customers not to linger or congregate. Don't touch market items, and don't double back. Next slide. Are there any questions?
I had a question. So in the beginning, you talked about new mandates starting. So when will those mandates start? You said June 15th?
June 15th, the next protocol will, the mandates that I just outlined are in place right now. The new protocols that will be coming June 15th, and I don't know what those are yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, second question. You presently, you know, how many farmers markets are open, roughly?
Probably 12 to 15.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And if you are interested in knowing when and where the farmers markets are, once again, the DelawareGrown.com website is a great resource. You can also go to de.gov/buylocal, and that has the same information.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, very, very valuable information there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. I also did share in the chat box our link to our evaluation. If you wouldn't mind filling that out, it just gives us a better idea of how we're doing and how we could do things better for our next webinar. On behalf of DSU, I want to say thank you to all the presenters that took the time to present today, and thank you to the participants that were able to come with us. Dr. Osbe, did you have anything else you wanted to add? And thank you for putting this together. It was very valuable information.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, I share, I echo the same thing. Just like you mentioned, we would like to thank you, all the participants, of course, our wonderful speakers. And thank you again. Enjoy your summer.